How feminism in Japan fell into decline. In the 1982nd, the Japanese feminist movement gained significant momentum, greatly elevating the social standing of women. But by the 1992nd, this progress experienced a rapid setback. In 1947, Japan enshrined gender equality in its constitution. At the same time, economic aid from the United States fueled the country's rapid growth. This led to a rise in women's education levels, and with better education, more and more women entered the workforce, no longer accepting the exclusive role of housewives. In the 1972nd, women's economic independence further strengthened their social awareness, sparking the first major wave of the women's liberation movement, which protested against all forms of unequal treatment. By the 1982nd, Japan's economy was booming, and companies were in urgent need of skilled labor. As women became increasingly educated, they gained more space in the job market and achieved greater financial independence. The number of women serving as lawmakers also grew. Still, deep-rooted prejudices persisted. Lower salaries than men for the same work, fewer opportunities for promotion, and cases of sexual harassment. As a result, the pressure for genuine equality intensified. Through considerable effort, in 1985, Japan signed the UN Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women and enacted the Equal Employment Opportunity Law, guaranteeing equal rights in hiring and reproduction. At the same time, women who had suffered abuse began to speak out, prompting laws on rape and harassment to be enforced again, something largely ignored before the 1982nd. This significantly improved women's social status, and feminism grew stronger. However, just as major victories were achieved, some groups began to abuse the rights they had gained. In the late 1982nd, at the peak of Japan's economic boom and speculative bubble, part of Japanese feminism veered toward extremism. One example was the popularization of the concept of the three wallets, the idea that to go out, a woman needed three men, one to pick her up and carry things, another to buy her gifts, and a third to pay for meals. Women, in this way, spent nothing, while luxury shopping and fine dining became symbols of happiness. Many men, without realizing it, served merely as disposable ATMs. This more radical mindset also led to the excessive use of rape and harassment laws, broadening the definition of crimes to the point where even minimal physical contact could be considered an offense. On the subway, for instance, a simple, accidental touch could trigger accusations. There were even cases where men, afraid of being accused, reacted violently, resulting in mutual assault charges. Policies such as women-only train cars and women-only dining areas followed. In the workplace, overreactions also occurred. A boss sending a few work-related emails to a female employee could be accused of harassment and fired. This caused many men to avoid interacting with women altogether, heightening tension and division between genders. But soon came the collapse. In March 1992, Japan's economic bubble burst. The sharp drop in property prices led to banking crises, bankruptcies, and a long period of recession. Surviving companies began cutting costs, and the job market became highly competitive. Because of the bad reputation some women had earned in previous years, along with perceptions of lower productivity, they were the first to be laid off. As a result, many lost their financial independence but maintained the high consumption standards they had adopted. With no income, many sought marriage as a form of security. The problem was that men, remembering past excesses and now earning lower wages, no longer wanted to play the role of human ATM and began avoiding relationships altogether. Some simply gave up on marriage or dating. This contributed to Japan's declining birth rate and rapidly aging population. Faced with this reality, women's standards for choosing partners plummeted from the so-called 3 highs, high income, good looks, high education, to 3D, less demanding. Even then, few men were interested, leaving many ordinary Japanese women unable to find a partner. Thus, Japanese feminism, once a strong, transformative movement, eventually lost its momentum and dissolved over time. So, if we stop to think about it, The history of feminism in Japan is almost like a movie script, but the kind that starts as an inspiring drama and ends as a bitter comedy. Because yes, in the 1982nd, it looked like Japanese women were about to rewrite the rules of the game. Guaranteed rights, financial independence, a place in politics, laws finally working in their favor. It was the kind of victory many people in other countries dreamed of achieving. But then came the human part of the story, and when I say human, I mean our special talent for turning progress into weapons against ourselves. Freedom became currency, rights became tools for consumption, and the dream of equality started being confused with the right to exploit the other side. And of course, when you mix a legitimate social struggle with exaggerations and personal gain, what happens? Simple. Credibility goes straight down the drain. It's almost ironic to think that a movement born to free women from dependency ended up reinforcing the image that many were willing to trade independence for a healthy bank account, as long as it wasn't their own, of course. And I'm not saying all women were like that, because they weren't, but excesses and extreme cases always get the most attention. And when the media, pop culture, and the market itself take those examples and turn them into trends, well, public perception changes. Then came the big twist of fate. The economic bubble burst. A life that had been an endless party of designer handbags and fine dining suddenly turned into a long, silent economic winter. And the market, cruel as always, has no memory of who was a pioneer or a fighter. It only sees numbers. And in those numbers, many employers decided that if they had to cut staff, they'd start with whoever they saw as less productive. And who was in their sights? Women. The result was almost cyclical. Without financial independence, many started to see marriage not as a choice, but as a necessity. But then came the second shock. Men were no longer interested in funding anyone's dream. Years of accumulated resentment, combined with the economic crisis, led many men to give up on marriage or even relationships altogether. And here lies one of the bitterest ironies of this whole story. In the end, both men and women lost. Japan was left with one of the most severe demographic problems in the world: an extremely low birth rate, rapid population aging, and an increasingly fragmented society. And that vibrant flame of 1982nd feminism? Well, it faded away, not because of external enemies, but because, in many cases, the movement lost itself from within. And you know what's even more interesting? This story isn't exclusive to Japan. If you pay attention, you'll find echoes of it in many parts of the world. Legitimate movements that, after achieving victories, start to fragment, radicalize, or lose touch with ordinary people. And then the cause, which once united, becomes a reason for division. The moral of the story? Rights won must be preserved responsibly. Because in the end, fighting for equality is not about swapping roles, it's about ensuring that no one depends on the submission or exploitation of another. And if we forget that, well, Japan's story is there to remind us of what happens. But that's just my take. You might disagree, agree, or even think I'm exaggerating. And that's exactly why I want to hear from you. What do you think really killed Japanese feminism? Was it the economy? Radicalism? Changes in relationships? Or a mix of everything? If you enjoyed this video and want to keep exploring stories that show how societies change and sometimes self-sabotage, you know what to do. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next videos. I promise there's a lot more content like this coming your way. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.